Welcome to the Team Engagement Podcast, where leaders of teams share their insights. We discuss 5 questions in about 10 minutes because leaders know how to be concise. I am very grateful to have Paul Glover with us today as our guest, and he is with Paul Glover Coaching. And Paul, thank you so much for taking time to be on the podcast today. What would you like the people to know about what you're working on and a little bit more about you?
Well, first, thank you very much for the opportunity, Sean, to speak to you and also to speak to your audience. Something to know about me. Well, I guess I bill myself as the no BS workplace performance coach. I don't, I actually am a recovering trial attorney, and I've taken that experience and turned it into a national coaching business, because I believe that most leaders, and by the way, I believe most leaders, when you say it's lonely at the top, it really is. It's lonely for one reason, and that is nobody will tell you the truth. By the time you hear a message, if you're at the top, it's been filtered by so many people that it's distorted. So I built my business out of telling leaders the truth. And I don't come to that relationship with the truth, but I found that by using 360-degree reviews and focus groups, I can very quickly determine what the truth is, and also can determine what the blind spots are for leadership. And addressing those blind spots are something that I believe is absolutely necessary for a leader who wants to get better. And I tell people the most difficult people to coach are successful people, because they already have done what's necessary to become successful. The question is always, do you want to get better? And if the answer is yes, then I provide that opportunity. So that's what I do. It's been an interesting career so far, and I actually think that I give value for what I do, and they keep paying me, so I think they agree.
Well, I love that approach, because you're absolutely right. There's 2 different kinds of people: those who feel their pain and those who don't. And the ones who don't perhaps need a little bit of a poke here and there. So I'm glad that you're taking that approach. Well, let's jump to our questions today. Let's start with our first one. Paul, if you would, share with the audience an example that you've experienced of collaboration within a team.
Absolutely. Well, first, I'm a strong believer in self-directed work teams. I think that is the future of work teams. And my experience was I was called in to actually do some consulting with a food delivery company that could not get their trucks loaded and out to their stores on time. They had some tight windows that they need to have delivery made, and it wasn't working. And so I met with the crew of 150 employees, a union shop, and we had a discussion. And because management's dictate to me was find a solution so these trucks leave on time. That's the problem, and it's a union shop, and there's actually a piece count, so that they were required to pick 1,600 pieces a day, but that's all they were required to pick. And of course, it depends on what your order was as you picked up your orders. If you were lucky and you got pallets of eggs, you can very quickly hit your quota and then go sit in the break room, because that's all you had to do. So obviously that's what stopped the process of getting the trucks loaded, because those with larger orders, more complex, took longer. And so when I sat down with the work team, I said, look, let's talk about the problem. And this was without management sitting there, and it's a union shop, can't offer them any more money. They're getting paid overtime if they work overtime. And I said, so how are we going to do this? How are you going to get the trucks loaded? And they said, absolutely no way can those trucks be loaded in that amount of time. We have so much work to do that if we had to pick one more box, it would kill us. I said, really? I said, so you guys really like working in this warehouse 8 hours a day? And the response was, well, no. I said, well, okay, then. I think that we might have some common ground here. How about if we work at one thing, and that is loading the trucks, and when they're all loaded, the warehouse is clean, there's no additional breakage, you get to go home and get paid for the full day's work. Well, 30 days later, I stopped in, and they had a break every 2 hours. So the last break before quitting time was 6 o'clock in the morning. I stopped in, there was nobody there except the teenagers who couldn't go home. So the reality was the team got together and said, look, we need to work with each other, collaborate with each other. So when you've got an easy load and I've got a hard load, you're going to help me. So the end results is we all go home early, still get full pay. Collaboration works if you're able to get the right motivation. Obviously, there was not obviously, but there was a group of employees who decided who did not want to do that. They felt they liked it the way it was, and they didn't want this. They wanted to get their opportunity to sit in the break room and not do any work. Well, that wasn't management's problem. It certainly wasn't mine. It was the employees' determination about meeting in the parking lot and saying, if you don't go along with this program, you need to do one of two things. Either find another job, or we're just going to beat the crap out of you until you go along. I'm not sure that I advocate that approach, but it was effective and it worked. So self-directed work, given the proper motivation, will take a process and through collaboration within that team and with management will improve the process. The issue is we don't let them. So that's my example of collaboration that worked very well. By the way, just as the epilogue, a year and a half later, the company and the union were negotiating a new contract. And of course, management did not like the fact they were paying employees not to work, right? So what they tried to do was increase the piece count, going from 1,600 pieces to 2,000 pieces would have accomplished what management wanted without giving them the time off. Of course, then the entire process fell apart and they went back to not getting their trucks loaded in 8 hours.
Wow, that's a great story, and I like how you introduced the element of motivation and helping people to recognize that there were some better ways of doing things that would be rewarding to them as well. So that's a great example. Well, question number 2, excuse me. I hear from other leaders of teams that it can be a challenge to measure engagement. What are your thoughts?
That's bullshit. That's absolutely bullshit. If you can't measure engagement, you're not spending enough time with the team, observing the team, paying attention to the team. I tell you right away that first, if a team is engaged, one of the absolute clearest ways to show that they are engaged is the fact they will go above and beyond expectations. Engaged teams absolutely will initiate and follow through with whatever task has to be done. They don't wait to be told what to do. They don't wait for an order. They just do it. They see what has to be done and they do it. And they will do it to the best of their ability, which normally means, assuming that they're reasonable expectations, they will exceed expectations. And if you're not measuring that, you're not paying attention to the team. Mm-hmm. Our problem with this, of course, is the Gallup engagement poll shows that only 36% of employees are engaged. And by the way, Gallup suggested we celebrate that. It just freaked me out. I was like, well, wait a minute. This is only a third of the workforce. So what do we do about this other 2/3 that are not engaged? And by the way, it's not only not being engaged, it's that 20% that are actively disengaged. They will destroy an organization. They're like a virus. I call them the working dead. And they will destroy the organization. Not only that, but I believe that they will sabotage, actively work against the organization. So when we get to engagement, first, I believe in the 3 A's. I think there's a very simple process here. First, you have to have attraction. And I'm not talking about physical attraction. I'm talking about leadership that is positive, enthusiastic, forward-thinking, people-centered. If you've got attraction, you will draw high performers to you. You will not draw poor performers because they don't want anything to do with that. The second A is that you need to pay attention. If you're not paying attention to people, don't expect them to perform well. People need attention. They need to know that you're in the moment with them. Leadership that is not with their team makes no sense to me. If you're locked away in an office someplace where you don't see what happens on a day-to-day basis, you cannot possibly believe that you know what that team needs when it comes to resources and how, excuse me, and how they're actually working together. If you don't know that, you can't make the course corrections necessary for the team to perform well. The third A is really easy for me. It's appreciation. If you're not expressing appreciation for what the team is doing, what's wrong with you? What you're telling them is you don't appreciate what we're doing. Why will I continue to do something that's not appreciated? So the reality is, I believe that engagement is solely in the hands of leadership, and they need to do a couple of things. Obviously, first they need to get rid of the working dead, and you know, and I know that when they do that, the first thing that they're asked is, "What took you so long?" But I think there's an unspoken question here, and that is, it took you so long to solve this problem that everybody knew was a problem. I actually am questioning your competence to lead.
Mm-hmm.
Understand the fact that every act we take as a leader is under a spotlight, and it's either a positive or a negative. There is no neutral here. If you act, it's going to be one of those two things. And if you're not doing the positive part, the team recognizes that and responds accordingly. Mm-hmm. So back to the answer. If you don't know the level of engagement of your team, you're not engaged.
That's a great point. Yeah, I like that a lot. The 3 A's of engagement. I think those are really great points about how leaders need to be involved with the teams. And I completely agree that if they're not directly involved with their teams on a daily basis, on a regular, consistent basis, and doing those 3 things that you talked about, they're not really a leader. They're in a leadership position. They might be in a management position, but they're not really leading the team. So great comments. Great comments.
There's always I have a post comment to a comment, and that is when you go in, and I know you do this. I can tell you do. When I start working with a team, there's a vibe, there's a hum to a team, mm-hmm. And an out coming in. I don't know who these people are. I can tell you immediately if this is a well-functioning team by the vibe, the feeling that they generate that I can feel as a stranger stepping into their environment. So the reality is, of course, if you don't feel that vibe, it's not there. Either you're not looking for it or it's not there. Anyway, sorry.
No, that's a great comment. Well, question number 3. What is one quality or attribute of a confident leader?
Curiosity.
I love that one.
Are not curious about everything, you should not be in a leadership position. I want to be curious about how you're doing. I want to be curious about how the guy next to you is doing. I tell leaders, you should be always looking for trouble. And you find trouble. By the way, if you don't want to see it, you can ignore it, but it's there. Always look for trouble. But the way you look for trouble is by being curious. Why are we doing it that way? Mm-hmm. Why is that process the way it is? Asking the question of the people who are in the process, showing you're curious, you will start getting answers. You need to improve yourself. And by the way, isn't that what a 360 is? I'm going to ask you questions, and I'm curious as to your answer. And if you don't treat feedback as a gift, shame on you. I am always stunned by leaders who don't want to do 360, which tells me right away there's problems. Or second, if it's negative information, they get upset.
Defensive, yeah.
This is a gift.
Yep. I love that, Paul. I love the aspect or the element or the attribute of curiosity. I could not agree more. I think that's such an important and very overlooked quality of leadership, is to be curious about everything that's going on around you. I love that. I'm glad you pointed that out. Question number 4, is there someone that you would like to recognize that has had a positive influence or impact in your life?
Oh, absolutely. Of course, my wife.
Mm.
She is my true north. I am a flawed person, terribly flawed, and she has no problem giving me feedback. Seriously, as a coach, it's amazing that you don't get more feedback. I mean, I guess if, like I said, people pay me, so I assume that it's at least a little positive. But the reality is that often coaches are given that subject matter expert position, and people don't challenge them. And so my wife, it's always interesting. If she's home, she may come in after I have a call, and she'll go, "Why were you yelling at that guy?" You know, don't be. She said, "Don't be rude." Right? Anyway, it is. She continually does my course correction for me, and I
I like
appreciate.
that.
She is yeah, she's the person I rely on.
That's great. I appreciate you recognizing her because I am a big fan of guests. I've had a lot of guests, and so many of them do recognize family members, whether it's a spouse, a parent, a sibling, aunt, uncle, whatever it may be. And of course, there's a lot of other people that can influence our lives. We're not trying to ignore all of those influences, but I find it so impressive and rewarding to hear of people that recognize immediate family members that have had that impact and that influence. So thank you for recognizing her. All right, Paul, go ahead.
Nope, just she
Okay.
deserves it.
All right. Fair enough. Well, our last question. Tell us a little bit about your first job.
Well, I grew up on a farm. My father was he worked nights as an electrician at General Motors plant, but he also had a farm, and I grew up, of course, working on the farm. And he paid me, but my first job. By the way, he was. I enjoyed going out with my friends in high school, and sometimes we'd stay a little bit too late, and sometimes we would have imbibed too much cherry vodka, for those who remember cherry vodka. And so, of course, Sunday morning would come, and I would not be in good shape, and so the job that I had, that I got paid for, my first job, was on Sunday mornings. I got to go to the barn and shovel cow shit. It served a dual purpose, right?
Imagine.
It was reminding me that there was a price to be paid for a consequence for your actions. If you're willing to tolerate the consequences, have at it. But there are consequences. So yeah, that was absolutely my first paid job.
I love hearing the guests who their first job was in some kind of farming, ranching, outdoor type experience, because they always have these great perspectives on things. So I'm really glad that you shared that. I appreciate that. Paul, thank you again for joining me on the podcast today. How can people find you?
Very simply, if anybody's looking for a coaching process that might occasionally have a size 10 and a half put up your butt, it's paulglovercoaching.com. Also, I can be found obviously on LinkedIn at Paul Glover Coaching.
Fantastic. This is Sean Richards with the Team Engagement Podcast, where leaders of teams share their insights. For more ideas, go to teamengagementpodcast.com. Again, teamengagementpodcast.com. And we also invite you to subscribe to the YouTube channel where you can watch the video, or subscribe to the podcast if you prefer the audio version. Thanks so much for joining us today, and have a great day.